Welcome to this episode of Preaching the Word, a video series on preaching sponsored by the Dunk Tank and the Berman Ministry Center. My name is Dr. Stephen Reasor, and I'm a preacher and author, and I teach preaching at Berman University in Lacombe, Alberta. In this episode, we return to edit the manuscript that we wrote in the previous step. This step is often overlooked by preachers who feel like they have already invested enough time and energy on their sermon, or who started the process late and do not have any more time to edit before they have to preach. But this step, the next to last step of our 12-step sermonic process, can mean the difference between a good sermon and a great sermon, a sermon that inspires and changes the congregation. We want each word of our sermon to have as much impact as possible. The fewer words we speak, the more weight each word carries. We are not trying to make the sermon say something different right now, but rather we are helping the sermon be as forceful as possible. If we edit our sermon, according to the 4 simple rules suggested by Robert Jacks, our sermon will speak more clearly and pointedly. So rule number 1, don't introduce a story or a statement. Just say it. Remove phrases like, "It goes without saying," or "I think," or "Let me give you an illustration." Cut them out, and your sermon will be better. Rule number 2, remove redundant words or phrases. In our last video, we talked about stating and restating the move claim in the moves opener and closer. This is intentional repetition. It's not redundant. What we want to edit out are unnecessary parts of the sermon. Parts that are dead weight, that add to the sermon's word count, but not its content. I can replace "let us join together in prayer" with either "let us pray together" or "join me in prayer." Instead of saying, "the reason we hurt is because of sin," we can say, "we hurt because we sin." The shorter statement has punch by removing the reason. It also removes the verb is, which leads us to our third rule. Rule 3, remove that, which, and the various forms of the verb to be whenever possible. Instead of saying, "It is to the cross that we have been invited to come," we can remove the it and that and say, "To the cross we have been invited to come." If we remove the redundant "to come" and change the past tense to a present tense, it's even stronger. To the cross we are invited. Better yet, we can change the passive to an active verb. The cross invites us. We've gone from 12 words to 4 words. The message remains, but in a more powerful phrase. Rule number 4, use simple, descriptive language. After a degree or 2 studying theology, you will have a growing theological vocabulary. While technical theological terms like propitiation and justification may be absolutely necessary at some point in your sermon, sacrifice and right with God are more familiar to your audience. And this is true for non-theological words as well. If we say inextricable instead of hopeless, we make it difficult for our hearers to follow our thoughts. At the same time, we want to use familiar words that are highly descriptive. It is better to say oak instead of big tree, or Corvette instead of fast car. If your audience knows oak and Corvette, then the image that springs to mind will be specific and clear. Descriptive words help us avoid modifiers like big and fast. The worst modifiers are very, pretty, and really. Try to use a familiar descriptive word instead. Jacks mentions several other rules, but these are a good place to start. I recommend you read Jacks' book, Just Say the Word, for a more complete guide to writing and editing your sermons. Now it is time to put these rules into practice. I've written a short illustration. It says what I need it to say at a certain point in my sermon, but now I must reread it critically and edit it to make it more concise so that it has greater impact. Let us consider an illustration. Imagine you are the owner of a small startup company. Your company counts on the diligence of your employees to meet the demands of your industry. And your employees are very hard workers. Well, most of your employees are pretty good. There is one employee, Bill, who shows up a few minutes late every day. He's the first to take a coffee break and the last to wander back to work. In fact, whenever you see him, it seems that he is a peripatetic vagabond looking for something to do. He wanders around and never finds anything to do. Bill has only ever done the bare minimum of anything that you have ever asked him to do. The bare minimum, but technically he still does what he is supposed to do. One day, Bill walks into your office and demands a raise. No, a raise is only part of Bill's demand. Bill wants several weeks of vacation each year. Bill wants a prime parking spot and a luxury company car to park in it. Bare minimum Bill says, I deserve to be treated better than I am being treated. You tell Bill you'll think about it over the weekend. Come Monday, what are you going to do? Now this illustration isn't bad, but it can be better. Let's edit it together. We start with the sentence, let us consider an illustration. We can just get rid of that completely. And we say, imagine you are the owner of a small startup company. Well, a startup is a small company, so we can simply say, imagine you own a startup. Your company counts on the diligence of your employees to meet the demands of your industry. Well, is it your company that counts on their diligence, or is it you? It's really you, so you count on the diligence of your employees to meet simply demands. Of course, they're going to be the demands of your industry, so that is redundant. And your employees are very hard workers. Again, we don't like the word very. Instead of saying very hard, let's simply say that they are awesome. Well, most of your employees are pretty good. Let's get rid of that pretty good altogether. In fact, we can get rid of the next two words as well. We'll simply say one of your employees, Bill, and we'll get rid of the who because it's unnecessary. Bill shows up a few minutes late every day. He's the first to take a coffee break. Well, it doesn't matter what the break is for. Let's just say a break. And the last to wander back to work. We don't need in fact, because that's only introducing what we're going to say next, so we'll just say it instead of introduce it. Whenever you see him. Now, I don't know if you know what a peripatetic vagabond is, but I had to look that word up. So instead of saying a peripatetic vagabond, let's simply say a drifter, because that's what it means. So we can say whenever you see him, he acts like a drifter, looking for work instead of something to do. Instead of saying he wanders around and never finds anything to do, we'll simply say looking for work and never finding it. We say that Bill has only ever done the bare minimum of anything he's ever been asked to do, but let's simply say that Bill has only ever done the minimum, and then we can repeat the bare minimum for emphasis without it being redundant. And then we'll simply say, instead of technically he still does what he's supposed to do, we'll simply replace that with the simple phrase for each task. Now we said on one day, but let's say Friday. It's more specific. Friday, Bill walks into your office and demands a raise. No, a raise is only part of Bill's demand. Bill wants several weeks of vacation a year. Several? Well, how many exactly? Let's be specific. Bill wants 6 weeks of vacation a year. Bill wants a prime parking spot and a luxury company car. Well, of course it's going to be a company car because he's asking you for it. And luxury car is not specific, it's generic. So let's say specific. A nice car would be a Mercedes. So Bill wants a prime parking spot and a Mercedes to park in it. Bare minimum Bill says, I deserve to be treated better than I am being treated. Well, again, that's redundant. What is he really saying? Bill's saying, I deserve better. And so you tell Bill you'll think about it over the weekend, and come Monday, what are you going to do? So now we have an edited manuscript. Let's read that together and see how it looks. Imagine you own a startup. You count on the diligence of your employees to meet demands. And your employees are awesome. Well, most of your employees. One employee, Bill, shows up a few minutes late every day. He's the first to take a break and the last to wander back to work. Whenever you see him, he acts like a drifter, looking for work and never finding it. Bill has only ever done the minimum, the bare minimum, for each task. Friday, Bill walks into your office and demands a raise. No, a raise is only part of Bill's demand. Bill wants 6 weeks vacation a year. Bill wants a prime parking spot and a Mercedes to park in it. Bare minimum Bill says, I deserve better. You tell Bill you'll think about it over the weekend. Come Monday, what are you going to do? The edited illustration is shorter and better. Your assignment is to go through your sermon manuscript and critically consider each sentence. Using the 4 rules from earlier, make your manuscript as concise and powerful as you can without losing the meaning and message of each move. Congratulations! You are nearly finished with your sermon preparation. When you have completed your assignment, join me for the next episode of Preaching the Word, the last one, where we will prepare our sermon and ourselves